The widow set a plate for him at supper, pork chops the way he liked them, a little burned at the edge. She set the fork on the left because his right hand had gone bad in the last year. She poured the coffee, he was not there to drink, and she left the chair pulled out, and she waited. Her daughter found her like that at 9 in the evening, talking softly to the empty seat, as if the man who had died 11 days earlier were only running late from the hardware store. The daughter did not panic. That is the part people get wrong about grief. She sat down across from her mother and she listened, and what her mother told her in a calm and reasonable voice was that her husband had not left, that he was in the house, that she heard him on the stair at the same hour every night, the third step that always groaned under his weight, and that the smell of his pipe tobacco came back into the front room around midnight, though no one had smoked in that house since he got sick. The mother was not frightened. She was comforted. And that, the daughter would tell me later, was the thing that frightened her most. I want you to sit with that comfort for a moment. It is the door through which everything in this account walks. My name is Father Chad Ripperger. I am a priest, a Thomistic philosopher by training, and one of the relatively few men the Church has formed and assigned to the ministry of exorcism in the English-speaking world. That last word makes people lean forward, and I would ask you to lean back instead. Most of what I do is not dramatic. I have spent 40 years in the priesthood. I have anointed the dying with the oil and traced the cross on foreheads gone slack. I have stood at more gravesides than I can number and said the old words over the lowered box, Requiem aeternam dona eis, Domine, eternal rest grant unto them, O Lord. I pray for the dead every single day of my life, by name and by category, the ones I knew and the millions I never will. So, when a family comes to me convinced that the dead have stayed, I do not arrive as a skeptic and I do not arrive as a showman. I arrive as a man who has spent his whole life on the border between the living and the dead, and who has learned by hard experience exactly how often the enemy waits at that border. Let me tell you what happened in that house. The details are composite. I will not give you a name, a town, a parish, or anything by which a living soul could be identified, because the people in these accounts deserve the dignity of not being made into a story. But I will not soften the shape of the truth to make it gentler. The shape of the truth is the only useful thing I have to give you. It began, as these things almost always do, with something innocent. The man died at home, in his own bed, with the sacraments. I want you to hold on to that fact because it matters more than the rest of the account combined, and we will come back to it. The funeral was done properly. There was a requiem mass, black vestments, the catafalque, the prayers the church has prayed over her dead for 1,000 years. And then everyone went home, and the widow was alone in a house that had held 2 people for 51 years. 51 years is a long time for a house to learn 2 people. Their sounds, their hours, the particular way a key turns in a particular lock. She told me she could have walked every room of it blind, and I believe her, because grief had made her blind in a way and she was walking it still. The clock on the mantle was his, wound by his hand every Sunday. She had kept winding it. The reading glasses were still folded on the windowsill. The pair of boots stood by the back door, toes pointed in the way he always left them. A house in mourning is a house that refuses to put anything down, and hers held its breath around her. The footsteps started about a week in, the 3rd stair. She knew that stair the way you know your own pulse. Then the chair, his recliner, angled toward the window, would be warm when she came into the room, or so she said, warm as if someone had just risen from it. Then the smell, pipe tobacco, cherry blend, the brand they had stopped making years ago. She had thrown the last tin out herself when the doctor told him to stop. And now the scent of it filled the front room at midnight, sweet and unmistakable, and she would stand in the dark breathing it in and feel, she said, that she was not alone. And then the night before, her daughter called me, the voice. Her name spoken once from the hallway in his voice, in the exact register he used when he wanted her to come look at something in the garden. Not a moan, not a wail, nothing from a film. Just her name, the way he had said it 10,000 times across half a century, ordinary and warm and impossibly close. She was not afraid. Understand that. She told her daughter she had prayed for this. She had begged God in the rawest hour of her grief, "Please, let me know he is all right. Let me feel him near." And now she felt him near. To her, this was an answered prayer. She had asked for a sign, and a sign had come. And who was anyone to tell her the sign was not what she thought it was? I sat in that front room 3 days later. There was a votive candle burning under a small framed image of Our Lady of Sorrows on the side table, and a rosary coiled beside it, and I noticed both, because the things a house keeps near its grief tell you what that house believes. I asked the widow to tell me everything, and she did, and she wept, but they were not frightened tears. They were grateful ones. She kept touching the arm of the recliner while she spoke, lightly. The way you touch a sleeping person, you do not want to wake. And I sat there and I thought about how the most dangerous lies are not the ones that terrify us. They are the ones that console us in exactly the place we are most desperate to be consoled. I asked her a few quiet questions. When the presence came, did she feel drawn to pray or drawn away from it? When she reached for the rosary, did the comfort grow or did it thin out? She thought about it for a long moment, and she said that on the nights she prayed, he seemed farther away. And so she had begun, without quite deciding to, praying less. She had started instead to talk to him, to leave the chair pulled out, to set the plate. She did not see what was wrong with that. Why would she? No one had ever taught her the difference between praying for the dead and conversing with them. To her, they were the same act of love. They are not the same act. One of them is the most powerful gift you can give a soul, and the other is the oldest trap in the book, and the whole distance between them is the distance this account is going to travel. Here's what the church actually teaches, and I am going to give it to you plainly, because almost no one in that woman's life had ever given it to her plainly, and that absence is the whole tragedy. At the moment of death, the soul is judged, not at the end of the world. That is the general judgment, the resurrection of the body, the last day. But for each soul, at the instant it leaves the body, there is what we call the particular judgment. The soul stands before God and sees itself as it truly is, and in that seeing, it goes to one of three places. To heaven, if it is pure and ready for the vision of God. To hell, if it has died in unrepented mortal sin and refused him to the end. Or to purgatory, if it died in friendship with God but still carrying the debt and the stain of forgiven sins, the soul that is saved but not yet clean. 3 doors. Death opens one of them, and it opens immediately. Notice what is not in that list. There is no 4th door marked the old house on the corner. There is no door marked the recliner by the window. The church has never taught, has in fact firmly denied, that a soul of its own power and its own will simply stays in the place where it lived. The soul does not haunt. The soul is not a tenant who refuses to move out, who lingers around the boots by the back door and the glasses on the sill because it cannot bear to leave. At the moment that man died, he went where the justice and the mercy of God sent him, and he went there at once, and no force on this earth could have kept him sitting in his recliner waiting for his wife to bring the coffee. The love does not vanish, but the soul does not stay in the furniture. St. Thomas Aquinas is careful and exact about this, and his exactness is a mercy. The separated soul, he teaches, is not bound to a place the way a body is bound to a chair. It is not stuck in a room because it died there or loved there. After death, the soul is fixed in the choice it made in life, turned toward God or turned away, and where it is depends on that, not on geography. A soul in purgatory does not pace the hallway of its old home, restless and trapped. It is held in the hand of God, suffering toward him, longing for him, and it is helped only by what we offer it at the altar. When Aquinas does allow that the dead may, by God's permission, appear to the living, he is plain about the reason. Such an appearance is for our instruction or for their relief, never for our entertainment, never to fill the empty chair, never to keep a grieving heart company at midnight. The moment a presence wants to be company, you have left Aquinas behind, and you are in the territory of the liar. So, what was on the stair? I told you we would come back to the sacraments, and here is why. There are 2 possibilities, only 2, behind a persistent presence after a death, and an honest priest will lay both of them on the table and not pretend he can always tell at a glance which one he is dealing with. The first possibility is a holy soul. The souls in purgatory are real, they are alive in Christ, and they suffer, a cleansing suffering, but suffering, and they cannot help themselves. They have no more power to earn merit. That door closed at death. They depend entirely on us, the living, on our prayers and our masses and our penances offered for them. This is not folklore. The church has held it from the beginning. In the second book of Maccabees, we read that it is a holy and wholesome thought to pray for the dead, that they may be loosed from their sins. St. Paul, in the first letter to the Corinthians, speaks of the man saved, yet so as by fire. The fire is real. And God in His mercy has at times permitted a holy soul to make its need known to the living, to ask in some quiet and indirect way for the prayers that will release it. St. Gertrude received such visits and gave us a prayer the holy souls themselves seemed to ask for. Padre Pio spoke of the dead who came to him in his friary at night asking for masses and then were gone. This is part of the Church's lived memory, and I will not deny it to you. But you must hear the weight of what comes next. A holy soul permitted by God to seek your prayers does not come to make you comfortable. It comes to be helped. It points away from itself and toward God. It does not settle into the recliner and become a warm, familiar presence you can talk to over supper. It asks for the Mass and then it is gone. It does not linger to be enjoyed. The whole direction of a true holy soul is upward, toward release, toward the God it aches to see. The saints who receive these visits describe them almost always as brief, sorrowful, and urgent, never cozy, never an invitation to keep the dead at the table. If a presence invites you to keep it close, to chat with it, to depend on it for comfort, to substitute it for the very prayer that soul would actually need, then you are almost certainly not dealing with a holy soul at all. Which brings me to the second possibility. And I have to tell you, after 40 years, the second possibility is far, far more common than the first. The enemy is a liar, and his oldest and most reliable trick is to wear the face of someone you love. The demonic can counterfeit the dead. It can reproduce a voice, a footstep, the smell of a particular tobacco, the timing of a habit, the small private details no stranger could know. Because the enemy has watched that house for years and forgets nothing. It knew about the third stair. It knew about the cherry blend. It knew the register of his voice when he called her to the garden. None of that requires great power. It only requires patience and proximity, and the fallen spirits have nothing but time. They had watched that marriage for 51 years the way a thief watches a house learning the locks. Why would it bother? Because grief is the most open door in the human soul, and the demonic goes where the doors are open. A grieving widow who has begged God for a sign is a woman who has, in her sorrow, told the unseen world that she will believe almost anything that feels like her husband. The enemy hears that. And it offers her exactly what she asked for, the footstep, the voice, the warmth in the chair, and it asks for nothing in return at first. It simply establishes itself as a comfort. It lets her come to need it. It lets her build her evenings around it. And all the while, it is moving her gently, 1 degree at a time, toward the one thing it actually wants, which is to get her to reach back, to answer, to seek the contact out, to pick up the telephone, so to speak, and place a call to the dead. That is the trap. That is always the trap. The footsteps and the tobacco are not the danger, they are the bait. The danger is the moment the grieving heart stops receiving the presence and starts pursuing it, starts asking it questions, starts wanting more of it, starts looking for ways to make the contact stronger and more certain. That is exactly the road she was already walking. She had stopped praying because prayer pushed the presence away, and she had started talking to it because talking drew it near. And she could not see that the thing she was feeding had carefully taught her which of those two doors to walk through. Because the moment a soul begins to seek out the dead, to summon them, to demand their voice on command, that soul has stepped over a line the Scriptures draw in the heaviest ink in the book. The 18th chapter of Deuteronomy could not be plainer. There shall not be found among you anyone who consults the dead, who is a medium, a necromancer, a caller-up of spirits. The Lord does not call these things unfortunate or unwise. He calls them an abomination. And he does so not because he is stingy with comfort, but because he knows what is actually on the other end of the line. He knows that the dead in his keeping are not at our beck and call, and that anything which comes when we summon the dead is not the beloved we are reaching for. It is the thing that has been wearing the beloved's face. Read the 28th chapter of the first book of Samuel sometime, slowly. King Saul, abandoned by God through his own long disobedience, goes in disguise by night to the witch of Endor and begs her to call up the dead prophet Samuel, and something comes. The story is sober and terrifying precisely because it does not tell you to relax. It tells you that the king who broke God's law to contact the dead heard his own condemnation pronounced over him and was dead himself within a day. Whatever Saul reached for in that tent, it did not bring him peace. It brought him the end. That is the consistent witness of the whole of Scripture about contacting the dead. It is not a neutral curiosity, it is a door, and there is something standing behind it. So I sat in that front room with a votive candle guttering under Our Lady of Sorrows, and I watched a good and faithful woman being slowly, lovingly walked toward that door by something that had spent 11 days teaching her to trust it. Now you want me to answer the question, how long does a soul stay in the house after death? I have come this far with you, and I owe you the plain answer, the one the title promised, and here it is, and I will not dress it up. The honest answer is none. The soul does not stay. There is no period, not 40 days, not a year, not until the funeral, not until the affairs are settled, during which the soul of your beloved hovers in the rooms of the house of its own accord, deciding when to leave. The instant of death is the instant of judgment, and the judgment is the departure. He was not on the stair. He could not have been on the stair. The man who had received the last sacraments and died in the friendship of God had, in the same breath in which he died, already gone to meet the Lord, whether straight into his joy or first through the cleansing fire of purgatory, and that is God's to know and not ours to demand. But he was not lingering in his recliner waiting to be missed. The teaching of the Church gives the grieving no permission to believe that, and I would be lying to you and endangering you if I told you otherwise to make the loss feel softer. Which means the warmth in the chair and the voice in the hall were not him. They never had been. From the very first footstep, on the very first night, the thing on the stair was not the man she had buried. It had only sounded like him. And the moment that truth landed in that house was the moment everything turned. I asked the widow to do one thing. I asked her, the next time she heard the footstep on the stair or her name from the hall, not to answer it, not to greet it, not to speak to it, not to welcome it, but to take the rosary from the side table and pray out loud for the repose of her husband's soul. To turn the whole of that midnight encounter away from the presence and toward God. To stop receiving the visitor and start praying for the dead. I told her plainly what I believed she was dealing with. She did not want to hear it. She wanted her husband. But she was a woman of faith underneath the grief, and faith, even buried, still answers when it is called by name. She did it that night, and what answered was not gratitude. The footstep on the stairs, she told her daughter the next morning, did not come gently as it always had. It came down hard, 3 times, fast, heavy, the way a man comes downstairs in a temper, and then the smell in the front room was not pipe tobacco anymore. It was something foul, something with no place in the memory of that house at all, and it was gone by the time she finished the second decade of the rosary. A holy soul does not recoil from prayer for its repose. A holy soul is begging for exactly that prayer, aching for it, dependent on it. Only one kind of thing curdles into rage the instant you start praying for the dead. And it is the kind of thing that had been sitting in that recliner for 11 days, pretending to be a man she loved, eating her grief like a meal. That is how you tell, not by how convincing the presence is, by how it responds to the holy. Hold a crucifix up to a memory and the memory does not flinch. Hold a crucifix up to what was in that house and it shows you its real face. The daughter was there for the worst of those nights, sitting on the floor with her arm around her mother while the stair came down hard above them and the foul smell rolled into the room. And she told me afterward that the hardest part was not the fear. It was watching her mother grieve her father a second time having to bury the comfort along with the man, having to accept that the warm presence she had clung to for 11 days had never once been him. That second grief is real, and I will not pretend it is small, but it is the grief that saves, because it is grief turned at last in the right direction toward the God who actually holds him. She kept praying. It took more than one night. But the footsteps stopped, and the smell never came back, and in their place, she told me later, came something quieter and far better than the warm, familiar presence had ever been. She started having masses said for him, one and then another, marking the cards in a little stack on the side table where the votive candle still burned under Our Lady of Sorrows. And the comfort that came from that, she said, did not feel like he was in the chair. It felt like he was finally on his way home, and that she was helping carry him there, and that this was what she had been begging God for all along without knowing how to ask. Now, I want to turn from that house to yours. You did not come here for a story. You came because someone you love has died or will, and you want to know what you are permitted to do and what you must never do, and I am going to tell you both as a priest who has stood where you are standing. What you are permitted to do, what you are commanded to do in love, is pray for your dead. This is the single most important thing, and it is the thing our age has almost entirely forgotten. If your beloved is in purgatory, he is not beyond your reach. He is precisely within your reach and within no one else's. Have masses offered for him. The Mass is the most powerful prayer the Church possesses, the very sacrifice of Calvary made present on the altar, and a single Mass offered for a holy soul is worth more than every sentimental word ever spoken at a graveside. Do not light a candle and send him good thoughts. Have the Mass said, pray the rosary for him. Give alms in his name. The old triad of prayer, fasting, and almsgiving has always been the Church's currency for the dead, and Maccabees commands it directly. Offer your own small daily sufferings for the repose of his soul, the headache, the long line, the cold morning. This is the communion of saints in action. The living and the dead bound together in one body, and you, still in the world, able to do for your dead what they can no longer do for themselves. And tend to your own soul while you do it. Go to confession. The priest's words spoken over you, whose sins you forgive, they are forgiven, are Christ's own gift in the 20th chapter of John. And a soul in the state of grace prays for the dead with far greater power than a soul dragging its own unconfessed weight up the altar steps. Receive the Eucharist worthily. The same Lord you receive on your tongue is the Lord your beloved is straining toward, and you are never closer to your dead than at the communion rail, because you are both reaching for the same God in the same instant. What you must never do is the other thing. Never seek to summon them. Never go to the medium. Never open the app that promises to let you talk to the departed. Never sit at the board. Never whisper into the dark and ask for an answer back. Do not chase the footstep on the stair. Do not build your evenings around the voice in the hall. If something comes that wears the face of your dead and asks you, however gently, to seek it out, to depend on it, to make it the center of your grief, that is the moment to reach not for conversation, but for holy water, and to pray for the soul of the one it is impersonating, and to let a priest into your house. The whole weight of Scripture and the whole experience of my priesthood say the same thing. The dead in God's keeping do not answer summons. What answers a summons is not your beloved. Now, let me tell you why all of this is landing on so many homes at once in our particular moment. Because this is not an accident, and it is not getting better. A century ago, that widow would have known in her bones what to do. She would have had a parish that prayed the office of the dead. She would have known the month of November belonged to the holy souls, that you had masses said, that you wore mourning and prayed and waited. The whole culture catechized her grief and handed her the rosary before she had to ask for it. That structure is gone. We have, across the West, very nearly stopped believing in purgatory at all. And a people that does not believe its dead need prayer will not pray for them, and a soul that is not prayed for waits longer in the fire. The funerals tell the story. We no longer bury our dead. We hold celebrations of life. The black vestments are gone, the prayers for mercy are gone, and in their place is a microphone and a slideshow and a quiet assumption that the deceased is already in a better place, already an angel, already at peace, requiring nothing from us. Every funeral now canonizes the dead and prays for no one, and the holy souls who needed those prayers go without. Into that vacuum walks the industry. Mediums on daytime television, apps that claim to rebuild your dead mother's voice from old recordings so you can keep talking to her. Grief made into a product, the contacting of the dead sold by subscription. And underneath the whole comfortable arrangement, the demonic is treated as a metaphor, a relic, a superstition, serious modern people have outgrown, which is precisely the condition the enemy has always worked hardest to create, because the lie that he does not exist is the only roof he needs. A people that has stopped praying for its dead, stopped believing in purgatory, stopped going to confession, and stopped believing the devil is real is a people with every door in the house standing open. I am telling you from inside this ministry that the enemy has noticed. He no longer bothers to hide. He does not need to. We dismantled the locks ourselves and then forgot we ever had them, and now we are surprised when something walks in. So here is what I am asking you to do, and I want it concrete, and I want it this week. This week, have a mass offered for your dead. Call the parish office, give the name, make the offering, and put the mass card where you will see it every day. If your dead have no one praying for them, be the one. Begin today, not someday. This week, pray for the holy souls every single day. The simplest prayer the church gives is enough. Eternal rest grant unto them, O Lord, and let perpetual light shine upon them. Pray it at a fixed hour so the day cannot swallow it. Pray it especially for the souls no living person remembers anymore. This week, go to confession. Not eventually. Make the appointment, walk in, and unburden your soul, so the prayers you offer for your dead rise from a heart in the state of grace and not from under a weight of your own. This week, receive the Eucharist worthily, and when you do, offer that communion for the repose of someone who has died. Give the Lord you hold to the soul that is reaching for Him. This week, draw the lines in your own home. Refuse every medium, every app, every ritual that offers to put you in contact with the dead. Name it to yourself as the door it is, and keep it shut. Bless your home. Keep holy water by the door and actually use it. Pray the rosary under your own roof, out loud, where your family can hear. And teach your children to pray for the dead by name, so that the thing the West forgot in one generation is remembered again in the next, in your house, at your table. And if a presence comes that you cannot explain, do not converse with it and do not fear it. Pray for the soul it claims to be. Sprinkle the holy water and bring in a priest. You give the dead nothing by talking to them. You give them everything by praying for them. I will not end this with optimism, because optimism is a feeling, and feelings are no defense against the enemy. I will end it with hope, which is a harder and a sturdier thing. Hope is the certainty that God is who He says He is and will do what He has promised, no matter how dark the room gets at midnight. The communion of saints is real. Your dead are not lost to you. They are bound to you in the one body of Christ, and the prayers you say tonight can reach them in a way nothing else can.